Good afternoon, everyone. It is Wednesday, February 24th, 2024. This is a school board workshop and the time is 12 p.m. We have 3 items on the agenda: strategic plan update for safety and security, followed by fiscal year 2025 budget discussion, followed by the agenda review of February 21st, 2024, the regular agenda. So per board protocol, we're going to strive for 4 minutes for initial comment, 2 minutes for follow-up, for a total of 10 minutes for discussion. So at this moment, we're going to move into item number 1, which will be our strategic plan update with Chief Newland and Mr. Irasi. Welcome.
Welcome. Good afternoon. Good afternoon, board members, Superintendent Dr. Bernier, and Board Attorney Kathy Dupree Bruno. Today we are doing a presentation on the strategic plan outcomes for safety and security. I will be starting by going over KPI 5.1, and then Director Ron Irasi from Constituent Student Services will go over KPI 5.2. KPI 5.1 is the increase in the percentage of students and employees that report a safe learning working environment. Slide 4. On my presentation is the KPI 5.1 scorecard. The scale is from 1 to 5. We are looking for a 4 to 5 for it to feel safe. As you'll see, the raw baseline for the different levels of schools and the employees was created from the spring accreditation data, and the official baseline was created from the fall accreditation data. The 23-24 target percentage is what we are hoping to get once a new company has been approved to establish a new survey for more direct questions for this specific measure. The 4-year performance target is the goal of going up 2% each year up to the 4th year, and I can talk more about this on the other slides as far as how do we get there. So from the questions, specific questions for elementary school student survey, the questions are: the adults make us feel safe. For secondary student survey, the question are: the adults make decisions to keep us safe. And for the teacher survey at my institution, we think of everyone's safety when making decisions. These are the questions asked based on the data that I showed you on the previous slides. So we look at the security practices, security protocol items and practices, layers of security. We talked about before about layers of security at every school site that correlate to students and staff that report a safe working environment. These are things such as drills that we practice monthly throughout the year, our open gate weapon detection system, our school resource officers, our Guardian program, the state requirements for educational facilities, which is SREF, the Florida Safe Schools Assessment Tool, which is FSAT, our Strategics Panic Alert System, our CRG mapping, our Knox boxes that we have in the exterior and interior of every school site, and also our law enforcement access to schools. Also considering safe school requirements and best practices as we go reach school with a single point of entry procedures, our secured exterior and interior doors, meaning access control and auto locks, our training. And then, of course, we have our zone security inspections. Our zone managers do zone security inspections at every school site throughout the year, completing a school security compliance report. So what are key indicators? Once we've achieved the fall survey responses with the questions, we can look into these based on not only the level of schools, but the individual schools to identify why the responses are a 3 and below. The survey can then be generated to create an additional question. If you choose a 3 and below, why is that? As we go forward and look at our strategic plan or strategic initiatives, how do we develop those to improve on the surveys, to get them above a 3? To improve the safety in those areas, we must take a deeper look into the reasons why, by the follow-up questions that we've created, meeting with particular staff and or students to identify these issues and make necessary changes before the next survey to improve those areas. By addressing those areas specifically and breaking it down to specific school sites, we can do a better generated questions to address those issues specifically on those problems we identify with each school site. And again, this would be the strategy we develop as a follow-up as we go into our performance targets in the future. And there's no questions with the KPI 5.1 at this time. I'm going to let Ron Irucci from Constituent Services go over KPI 5.2. Thank you.
Good afternoon, Chairman Fisher, board members, Dr. Bernier, and other Lee County staff. It's a pleasure to be here. As Mr. Newland said, I'm Ron Irucci. I'm a Director of Constituent Services and Student Discipline. I have two other members of the Constituent Services team with me today. This is Tammy Scott, and Rachel Gould is sitting in the audience with us today. As Mr. Newland said, I'm going to be talking to you a little bit about KPI 5.2, which is to decrease the incidence of student crime, violence, and disruption today. This is just kind of a brief overview of the Student Services team, of which the Constituent Services team is a part of. So we make up the part that deals mainly with student discipline and constituent services. So we try to work with principals on different aspects of student discipline. We also have other responsibilities and projects within that team that we take care of. And these are the other members of the Student Services team, which is Positive Prevention, the Sandy Hook Promise, Health Services, Psychological and Social Work Services, School Counseling, and Mental Health all make up the Student Services team. Specifically for constituent services, this is kind of a brief overview of some of our responsibilities. As I said, we work with constituents. We try to connect parents and community members when they do have concerns to the appropriate person to make sure that those concerns or issues are resolved. We are involved in FTE state reporting. We do conduct hearings as a part of a student's due process. So the Success Academy Review Committee and the District Alternative Reassignment Appeals Committee are opportunities for parents and students to voice their concerns over discipline or make an appeal to an out-of-school suspension or reassignment to the Success Academy. We do work with multi-tiered systems of supports. We do provide professional development for administrators and other staff members. We are involved with research and design of our alternative programs. We are the Safe Schools liaisons for our department. We do work with student enrollment quite often, especially when it comes to disciplinary related issues. And again, we are involved with Success Academy reassignment, so we work with students to transition them to and from Success Academy. So as I mentioned, there are three of us in our office. This team has really been established since November. Previous to the three of us, Brian Mangum mainly had that responsibility of constituent services and student discipline. And as a result of that, we were able to expand some of the processes and functions that we could work on together as a team. So some of those are listed here. So we are in the process of exploring alternative placements. We have surveyed and researched up and down the west coast of Florida, different counties and what they're doing with their alternative programs, and in the process of evaluating what we do as far as its effectiveness. We can link preventative measures now with incidents. We can provide principals and teachers professional development. We are monitoring progress towards the KPI goal, so we do progress monitoring towards this particular goal. We were able to engage stakeholders and gather feedback, and many of you, as part of some of those committees like DAC and some of the other student advisory committees and some of the community forums, we are able to go out into the community. Managing the code of conduct is also one of our responsibilities, so we have received quite a bit of feedback on our code of conduct, and I think in a couple months you'll hear from us again as we're ready to make recommendations for next year's code of conducts. And we are also able to monitor our referrals for any disproportionality. Okay, so the KPI baseline data, and put my glasses on, take a look at this. So let me explain this. Again, the goal is to decrease the incidence of student crime, violence, and disruption. So what this slide shows you is our official baseline data, which is the 2023-2024 performance target, which our baseline data shows us, which is last year, based on last year's data, if that makes sense. So Most of our data is compiled at the beginning of the next school year and reported on December of that year. So we have a report that came in December, which gave us the data and the assessor data that was provided to us in the previous year. So in essence, that is where our baseline data has been established. So the 4.79 represents 4,749 incidents. Those are assessor incidents, and those are the incidents that are reported to the state. And that is a percentage of our total population. So the 4,749 incidents that it had, and an incident can be in a referral. It could be 1 student, it can be 10 students. Let's say, for example, we'll use fighting, for example. So if fighting would involve 2 students, obviously, but it could be 2 students, it could be 5 students. That is all considered 1 incident. So this is the number of incidents in relation to the population. And so our target for 23 and 24, if you look, the official baseline was 4.79%. So 4.79 is the incidence related to the enrollment. Our target would be to reduce that to 4.5%. And then over the next couple of years, you can see where it goes to 4.25%, 4%, and by 2027, 2028, our goal is to reduce that number to 3.5%. Thought it would be beneficial for the board to see some historical data on some of our assessor incidents over the previous 4 years, so you can put into perspective where our assessor incidents have been. But remember that we are primarily working on for this goal from last year to this year. But again, this is some historical data. So the top 5 assessor incidents over the previous 4 years are as follows. And assessor stands for School Environmental Safety Incident Report. And those actually are defined by the state. So they're not part of our local codes. We do have local codes that we have established within our code of conduct, but these are established by the state legislature, and we are required to report them to the state. So these are the top 5 assessor incidents, and you can see down the left-hand side we have fighting, tobacco, drug use, possession, simple battery, and disruption on campus have been our top 5s. And then if you look to the right, we start with 2019-2020 year, which again, we mentioned that Q4 of that year was a virtual year, just to keep that in perspective. And then the number of incidents that occurred within that assessor are broken down by our district schools and our charter schools that are part of our district as well. We are required to report them all as one. We don't separate them out to the state, but they are reported all as one. So the orange percentages you see below that is the number of incidents, again, related to the population. Now, just like our KPI goal has the number of incidents related, so these are all broken down in the same manner. And so you could see under fighting, 0.5% is the number of incidents based on the population, which at that year was 95,600 and odd change. Which, as we go across the board, remains relatively the same. So a 0.2% increase and a 0.1% increase from 2021, 2022 to 2022, 23 is not a significant percentage. But if you look at the number of incidents, and remember that the population is going up too, so the number of incidents have increased, but it is increased proportionally to the population. If you want to take a look at tobacco, again, 0.5% in 2019-2020 has risen all the way across the board to 1.1% in 2022-23. Drug use possession started out in 2019-2020 as 0.3% and has risen to 0.9%. So that may seem like a number, again, not as a significant increase in the percentage, but when you look at the incidents that are involved, because our buildings, administrations, and staff have pretty much stayed the same, so they're handling more incidents that occur within their buildings, so that's a significant piece to look at there. Simple battery has gone from 0.2% in 2019-2020 and has remained relatively, but then we saw a pretty big jump from 2020-2021 to 2021-22, and then a little bit of a decrease from 2021-22 to the following year. But again, the number of incidents have almost doubled over over that time period. And disruption on campus is one of the bright spots here, that we've seen actually a reduction in disruption on campus from 2021-2022 to 22-23 as almost 0.1%. So this is now a comparison from last year, school year 23 to school year 24. So we took a look at the first semester of last year as compared to the first semester of this year, because this is actually directly related to our KPI goal then. And as you can see, we did have some increases in fighting, went up 0.01%, but the number of, again, incidents has risen by about 70 some incidents. Tobacco use has actually stayed relatively the same. Drug use, possession, again, has stayed relatively the same from last year to this year. Threats and intimidation, pretty much the same, as well as simple battery. So again, from last year to this year, we did not see significant increases, but remember, our goal from last year to this year is to reduce the number of incidents. And so we are using monitoring tools to watch that on a continual basis. We included this slide in here just for your reference. These are local codes. They are not directly reported to the state, and some of these local codes, our charter schools are not required to use those local codes. They may have some of their own that have been established by their own boards, and so that's why they're not separated out into this graph here. And so just, and again, these incidents are our top 3 that are local codes: disruptive behavior, insubordination, disrespect, skipping. We included these because we think these can impact some of the assessor codes as well, so you get a good perspective of where we're at. So as you can see, disruptive behavior from 2019 to 2020, even with the virtual, and remembering that year, the fourth quarter was virtual, we've seen a fairly significant increase in some of those local codes, especially disruptive behavior. Went from 8.2% in 2019-2020 all the way up to 17.2% in 2022-23. Insubordination and respect also almost doubled in their percentages, from 8.2 in 2019 to 13.9 in 22. Skipping classes has also been, we've seen quite an increase in that, from 4.5%, again, almost doubling to 9%. And just as a side note to that, in our local codes, up until last year, much of our school district operated on 2 different platforms. So we had Castle at one point that some of our schools still operated, and now everybody this year is required to enter all of their referrals in Focus. We don't know exactly who did what last year, but we have a good idea overall of what the percentages were. So just a side note there. And again, this is the local codes, the top 3 incidences in a comparison from last year to this year, which is the same thing we did with assessors, because that's directly related to our KPI goal. So we wanted to include these as well. So our disruptive behavior, we've seen a 1.1% increase from last year to this year, almost a 3% increase in insubordination and disrespect, and a significant, almost doubled increase again in skipping. I want to talk a little bit about some of our responsibilities and what we're doing to help monitor the KPI goal and to help with making sure that those numbers decrease along the way. So I wanted to present to you some of the, we pretty much know what some of the disciplinary issues are in the code of conduct at different levels, but these are some of the preventative measures that we have in place, and also some of the restorative measures. So the preventative measures obviously are intended to prevent that behavior. If a student or a group of students does engage in that behavior, we try to restore them back to their normal classroom as well after that, and that comes on the restorative side. So some of our preventative measures are positive behavior intervention supports, or PBIS, the Sandy Hook Promise, Wellness Wednesdays, peer-to-peer mentoring, the Listen Initiative, student advisory groups, which give us a lot of feedback, are all meant to help prevent such behaviors. And again, once those students do engage in some of those behaviors, to get them back on track, we use peer mediation, we use restorative agreements, counseling, we use the Prevention Center and Success Academy as restorative practices, and anti-vaping, drug use, and alcohol curriculum as well for those students who engage in that behavior. As part of our progress monitoring, to make sure that we are making progress towards our KPI goal, these are some of the things that we engage in. We are in the process of establishing a system of data amongst our stakeholders. So making sure that our principals, teachers, and our community are aware of the data and what the data is producing to us, so that we're monitoring that on a regular basis. Linking CESR codes with preventative measures. We currently do not have that process in place, but so for example, if we want to put preventative measures in place for fighting, then some of the wellness initiatives and things like that that we do, coping skills, anger management, all of those kinds of things to help our students on the preventative side, we want to link those to the codes to make sure we have preventative measures in place that are actually working. And then, so to link local codes with the MTSS process. So, most of our local codes have to deal with issues that are related in the classroom and in the building. And so if we look at this from a multi-tiered system of support, what do we have in Tier 1? What are our policies and practices in the classroom level to reduce the amount of disruptive behavior we have? At Tier 2, which is, those are typically, Tier 2 is known as different forms of discipline, whether it's ISS, OSS, et cetera. And then Tier 3 is our specialized program. So when we do refer a student for alternative placement, whether it be prevention, success, or any other specialized program, that would be a Tier 3 type of intervention towards that goal. That's the presentation for today. I don't know if we're fielding comments for either Director Newland or myself. I'm more than happy to answer any questions.
Dr. Bernier, do you have any comments?
Just some quick minor adds, sir. I think Chief Newland did a great job of describing, and certainly the robust level of questions through the accreditation survey regarding safety, one question per group, doesn't give us the necessary tools that we need. If you'll recall, last board meeting, I pulled an item because we wanted to make sure that we had a contractual agreement extending beyond just this year and into next for a company called Thought Exchange. Thought Exchange is a lot like a company like Gallup. They have a survey suite. We have the ability to create a set of questions, as Chief Newland said, to provide that deeper, richer need that we have to understand more about how students, staff, and other employees feel about their safety at school, including how parents feel about it as well, and then be able to drive down to specific schools, not just have an overall district number. So I wanted to just make sure that we understood, and that's on G1 tonight. And then the aspect of our student discipline data has gone over in cabinet multiple times. I don't know how to tell you other than to just be transparent that our goal is, as our population rises, it's not enough just to see our numbers remain the same. We've invested heavily in constituent services. These people have been on the job and will continue to do the work, but our goal overall will be to see these numbers continue to decline. Specifically, I want to say that we specifically chose to present the information on what Ron talks about as local codes because of some of the expression from the board, including Chair Fisher, just prior to the holidays. When you think about some things that impact teacher and employees' feelings about wanting to be in school, things like classroom disruption, insubordination, and whether children are in class or not, are some of those factors which drive a less than positive feeling about a workplace environment. So wanted to make sure that we brought forward some of those high incidents and making sure that we could have a robust discussion around some of the data we're finding. As to disproportionality, the team is prepared and can provide that information if there's a request from the board. So thank you, sir.
Thank you, Mr. Superintendent. Board member questions, comments, discussion? Mr. Persons.
Yeah, first I want to thank that we can get into specific school sites. I think that's important, but I was just wondering, we have these numbers that say like disruptive behavior for local codes, 17,000 something. how many students does that involve? I mean, how many of those are the same student doing multiple type things? I mean, do we track that, or? I imagine each school, they would be, repeat offenders, they would be aware of it, but.
And we do have the opportunity to break down all of that data by school, so we can break it down by teacher, we can break it down by building, and we are certainly in the process. One of the things I talked about was, establishing a process where our buildings are continually on some intervals, monitoring that data to see where their most critical needs are within those buildings. But we can track also the number of students. And I said it gets sometimes cloudy because there could be, that we report them by incident.
Right.
But there could be, but we can now we can drill down into the data a little bit further.
And like they were just talking about teachers feeling that they're not being supported because the same student commits the same thing over and over and over and over. I don't know if there's warning bells or what should be going off in that situation, but.
When you look, Mr. Persons, it's a great question. So I think I want a more clarified answer as to whether the numbers for the board, whether the numbers potentially under disruptive behavior, insubordinate disrespect, or skipping, are those single incidents, or do they involve students who've been involved each time they're disrespectful? Are they included in that number?
They are each time.
Each time. So if you have Christopher Bernier and he's a little disrespectful on Monday, and then he's disrespectful on Tuesday, he's going to count each time into that number. We can pull from that data, we could pull out those number of students who are consistently behaving in a manner or means which will create a disruption in the classroom. Certainly our principals are well aware of who those individuals are, and our teachers are as well. And that's where it begins to look towards some of the intervention programs that they are currently working, trying to tie in again. One of the studies that they have underway now, for instance, because it was a request last year, I'm assuming it'll be a request again this year, was can we look at how effective something like positive behavioral intervention supports are. Our data does show that, at least last year, that our schools who are involved in that process have better rates of discipline, or lower rates of discipline, I guess I would say. But we want to continually monitor that process in order to get back to see whether those initiatives continue to be able to work. That's one of the reasons that we have 3 people now in constituent services. When Mr. Mangan was present, his job primarily was just keeping up with the influx of information. We have to look at other alternative settings. We have to find ways to give our teachers and and their fellow students an opportunity to be able to learn within a classroom.
That was all I had.
Ms. Langford Fleming.
Yes, thank you. Thank you for updating us on this incredibly important information. As I get out to schools, this is one of the top concerns that administrators are dealing with, and frustrating teachers, because it is preventing them from doing what they love to do. And I have had this conversation in the last 3 schools I've been to in 2 weeks. So first of all, just out of curiosity, when we look at the tobacco and the drug use, which one of those categories, I think I already know, but which one of those categories is vaping falling under?
They actually fall under both. So depending on if THC or some other substance is found in the vape, then it is classified as drug use. If it's just tobacco, and typically we test all of the vapes that we confiscate to see if there's what the substance is within that.
So the reason I'm asking is because I've had many parents call me, and conversations in community about how much this is actually occurring in parking lots before and after school on our campuses. And are we surveying those parking lots? Do we have people out there in the morning and in the afternoon, before athletic events, after athletic events? Because I keep hearing it over and over again, and it's not at one school, and it's not even in one area, it's county-wide. So I think that's something that we need to consider really keeping an eye on, because things are happening before students are walking in buildings, and if they feel a certain way or have taken in something beforehand, there's a possibility they're going to hit someone, break something, talk back to a teacher. I think it all correlates in their behavior and attitude, or maybe sleep through class, or decide, I don't feel like going to school, I'm just going to keep walking right off this campus. So I think it's something that we need to take very seriously. The other thing I was looking at, and I thought this was very surprising, if you go to slide 13, it talks about semester 1, semester 2, Ian versus non-Ian. We only went up around, I don't know, 2,000 plus students in the district. But wow, look at the difference in situations or incidences in the charter school, almost more than half. I mean, that's like 100% increase. And I mean, I don't have the answer to this. I would sure like to understand why that happened. Other than simple battery, everything else has increased substantially in our charter school system involving any of these incidents. So I think that's something I'd really like for all of you to look into and maybe get back to us. Can I continue, Mr. Fisher? Okay, just two more things. When we go to the absences, I know as a former teacher, I had students over the years, whether it be family issues or it could have been a foster situation, it could have been you know, a guardian situation, but students that aren't coming to school obviously are missing so very much. And sometimes those students fly under the radar because it's not that they aren't intelligent, so their grades may not necessarily reflect that they are struggling in school, but they're struggling somewhere and it's going to catch up. There are going to be gaps in their learning. So I think that I'm not sure how we're utilizing our truancy officers. Are they just inundated? Right now, I would imagine so. I know when I had a student missing X amount of days, I brought it to administration. Administration brought it to truancy, but how are we utilizing that, if you don't mind me asking?
I'll have to get with the department to see as far as how many calls they get, as far as following up on the truancy reports. Depends on the jurisdiction or city. I know Fort Myers had a truancy in their ordinance. Cape Coral and the county may be a little different as far as how that's enforced, but I have to check with them to see how that's, you know, how is that being followed up on, the reports they get, and then what is the, you know, when they return that, how's that being reported back? I can get that back to the board, that information.
So our PBS schools that are using positive behavior, I know that they're in elementary anyway, because that's where my expertise is. We used PBS even for attendance purposes. But as our students get older, I think the PBS system needs to mature in what they're interested in. So for example, we get treasure box maybe in elementary school. Well, I don't think an 11th grader is going to care about getting a treasure box item, but they might care about getting to, I don't know, eat outside in a calmer, pleasant environment or something like that to enforce positive behavior, which brings me to my last thing. We went to, let's see, what slide was that? I'm sorry, I should have written that down. If we go to the disruptive behavior, slide 14, insubordinate and disrespectful, I guess, post Ian, which it seems to have continued to increase in these two areas, there is a reason why children are acting out. There is a reason why students are acting out from the age of 5 all the way to 18. Something is going on there. How are we utilizing our counselors and our mental health specialists? Are they accessible to these students? And not just the ones that you find, oh, they've got this little, like this red flag. There are a lot of students struggling with a lot of things that you would never even know. So are we utilizing these counselors? Do students feel that they can go talk to these individuals about something that they need? Are we getting parents involved? Because I've often heard that these individuals in our special areas are being used for covering classrooms, covering testing. They're not accessible all the time, and I think that's really important. I know a couple of meetings ago, if it wasn't the last meeting, we had two healthcare professionals, or excuse me, mental health professionals that work in our district talk about how all they want to do is help these students, but they're having to cover classrooms, they're having to do things outside their job scope, if you will. So those are just my thoughts. I'm sorry, I hope I didn't rattle on, but those were the things I drew from this presentation, and I think it's something that those points we need to really take seriously. Thank you.
If I can. All really great opportunities for us to continue to grow and continue to learn. Some interesting things about local incidents. I think over the past several years since CESAR was not new, and because of the severity of making sure that all CESAR results are appropriately reported because they have to be reported to the state. One other factor that you may see in terms of the number of documentation, especially moving from 2021 to 2022, is the advent of our student focus system. In the past, teachers wrote paper referrals. I'm going to ask you to go back to your teaching days where maybe one of those referrals that unfortunately you may have had to write over a particular incident because you didn't write that many, somehow never seemed to get back to you. It got lost on the dean or the assistant principal's desk. Now with Focus and it literally going into the computer system right out of the get-go, it has to be dealt with because it has to be closed out. So one of the things we are noticing is we've moved to a better electronic system of tracking our discipline data. That may be one potential reason for increase. I will tell you that our high school and middle school principals do amazing work of trying to take PBIS to a higher level. I only have some anecdotal evidence for you. We can certainly look into it as we study the PBIS process again this year to see whether it's being effective. But things like prom tickets, yearbook expenses, those are other things that students can earn. Clearly, yes, a treasurer box with a pinwheel in it is probably not very motivating to a high school junior or senior. But certainly being able to have an athletic ticket or a free pass to home football games or to our girls flag football games really gives students an opportunity to belong. You also raised one very important issue, and I can't answer it fully other than I know that our high school principals in particular are very cognizant and aware of where their incidents are occurring, especially in student parking lots. There are people paid very specific supplements to be safety people in those locations, but we can certainly follow up with our high school principals through our executive director, Mr. Simmons, and make sure we get some additional data for you.
Thank you.
Okay. Anyone else? Ms. Patrica, followed by Ms. Juvenelli.
You're going to have to stop me, because I got a lot.
Almost did on Jada.
Thank you.
Just like
Well, the problem is you didn't go before me, so I'm going to ask all the questions you would ask. I want to start, if I may, through the chair by sort of commenting on something that Mrs. Langford Fleming said about the parking lot usage, vaping in the parking lot. So I've also heard about parents who are brought in to retrieve their child's vaping devices, and before they even walk out of the office, they hand the vaping device back to their child. So we've got sort of both sides of the issue going on, parents who are stunned and amazed by the vaping, and then parents who are like, my kid paid good money for that and I'm giving it back to him. So that's an issue. Dr. Bernier, you mentioned parents. But I didn't see a KPI for parents feeling safe, and I'm wondering whether we're thinking about asking about that. As a parent, I'm not sending my child to school if I don't feel safe sending them to school. So is that something we should be asking about?
It's 100% which we should be asking about, but unfortunately our survey tools and the parental surveys don't ask that question for accreditation. So we had to utilize the information that we had in order to begin to move forward with creating the measurements. We need a survey suite, and we need very specific questions that are asked on an annual basis to give us an annual track. And that's what G1 on the agenda does tonight. It gives us thought exchange and the ability to move forward. They have set surveys, but specifically for somebody like Chief Newland, it gives him the opportunity to readdress and then drill down to the school level, both parent, student, and teacher responses.
Okay, great. So that leads to my next question, which is, how do we ensure teacher anonymity in responding to these surveys while still being able to drill down to the school building?
You can, because you don't ask them for their name and their grade level and things like that. The reality of surveys and survey data is always, I'm going back to my doctoral research on the N number and how many N's you need, how many numbers of people you need to respond. And it always surprises me how small that number can be and still be statistically relevant. As we build a speak up, listen up culture, as we create the opportunities for people to respond and know that their data is going to be reported and that we're not going to hide behind anything related to disruptive behavior, and we're going to announce those numbers and track them longitudinally over time. Same way with the survey data. I don't know how to do it other than to continue to express to people that while by identifying your school, you narrow yourself down to potentially a particular school, but nothing with Thought Exchange collects an IP address or any opportunity from where that response came. Other than to tell people that's not what we're interested in. We're not interested in necessarily who's reporting it unless they want to be known. What we're interested in is as many people as possible reporting the information so that we get an idea of where we are as a school district and where we are with individual schools and can share that data, just the raw data, with our principals, not who responded, but what their percentages look like.
Okay, and then when you report this, hopefully you can let us know what the participation percentage was so that we as a board can determine whether we can rely on it.
I will always make sure that the board understands what the N number is for the number of respondents.
Okay, may I keep going, Mr. Chair?
Yes.
Slide 6. I don't think it was written on slide 6, but there was mention of drills. And it's ironic that the conduct of drills makes us safer, but yet makes some students and parents feel less safe. So you're asking about whether you feel safe, and then you're conducting drills to actually provide safety, but that's going to lead to a negative survey result. Am I making sense?
Yes, I think part of it is drills are important to the fact that if something was to happen, we want to make sure everybody knows how to respond and where to go. Maybe it's not something we like to do or think about, but when the time comes, it's almost that muscle memory.
Right.
But I think that's why we talk about when you take a deeper look into the responses to a specific school, it may be based on an experience maybe of a drill or lack of, or, and I think there has been some changes to drills where there's less drills that are required per year, I think, because they want more put into those drills exercises. So, at one point, we always used to do drills monthly. That's no longer going to be the case moving forward. Okay. So that's maybe part of it. If it's too repetitive, but I think, again, getting information back, being able to do a deeper dive into the responses and why may lead us to that same reason.
I think it's empowering to parents as well to be equipped with the ability to conduct drills in their own home. And I don't mean that literally. I mean having that conversation around the dinner table. If you're in the gym and you hear there's a shooter in the cafeteria, what do you do? If you're in the cafeteria and there's a shooter there, what do you do? Like, parents might not even have enough knowledge about the drills that are occurring in our schools to have those conversations at home. So I don't know if there's a way we can talk to parents about that. What services do we provide to parents who feel unsafe? Never mind, that's been answered. Okay, so getting to slides 11 and 12, and you hit on this, Dr. Bernier, are we going to just stop or decrease reporting? So what I mean by that is this. You said Christopher Bernier is a little disrespectful on Monday and on Tuesday, and you are reported twice for separate incidents of disrespect. The principal goes to that teacher and says, this is a classroom management issue. That teacher is not going to report Christopher Bernier on Wednesday, Thursday, and Friday when he does the same thing. Instead, that teacher is going to struggle through keeping that child in the classroom, right? Like, it's a matter of how we're responding to the incidents that are occurring in our schools. And, we talked, Mrs. Langford Fleming, about the environment in the classroom and in the school, and if we're going to drive down these numbers just by not making improvements, that's my concern. That's what I have seen in my 7 years on the board. I've seen a decrease in reporting, not a decrease in incidence. Am I making sense?
I think you are, but I'm going to paint the same scenario that you started off your comments with regarding the pulling of a vaping pen and a parent responding to it. The supposition of your first response to this particular question said, I as a principal now go to my teacher and say, this is a classroom management issue. If you don't fix it, that's going to be a problem for you. Clearly, that could be a response from our principals. But in reality, I believe that many, if not all of our principals believe that discipline is a shared responsibility and that a teacher would be provided help and assistance in those particular issues. It's always great to walk school buildings with our principals and ask for 3 people to be seen. I ask to see a high flyer, somebody who's a rock star, somebody they believe sets the world on fire. I want to see someone who's middle of the road, may not coach every sport, may not be part of every club, comes in, does great work every day and goes home. But I always want to spend some time walking with a principal talking about somebody they're working with. And that's been a shift in how not only I walk school buildings and classrooms, but how the academic services team walks. And we have the convening of all the districts currently going on down in the Caloosahatchee room, where we're being recognized for having a more open approach towards school improvement and removing schools from the BSI or the state oversight project. So yes, I think there is the possibility of those things arising where a principal and a teacher don't always see eye to eye, but I think the bottom line is we have to always keep in mind and continue to train and continue to give our principals and teachers the opportunity to understand how they can move forward and what other options there are. There's also state language that allows for a teacher to ask for a student to be removed from their particular classroom. The question always becomes a debate when that's done of where do we put them? I mean, do I move them from my classroom to Ron's class? Do I want Ron to get my second grader? We have to work through those things. So the critical component, I believe, is no longer having a paper process where things can get lost. Teachers can log into Focus, write their student up as they like, as we all like to say. It's a discipline referral. It refers information from one location where it didn't happen to another location to be dealt with. The systems that I've worked in that have been most successful is people understand that when you refer an issue to another individual, you're up to, you've transferred the responsibility for them now to deal with it. If I can make Johnny a better child on Tuesday because I walk around the building with him and I give him some tasks to do and he finishes his homework with me, then great. I don't always have to suspend a student. So there's, when you talk about student discipline, classroom management, administrative response, they're all interrelated. And it's in a perfect world, it works great. The dance looks like a highly performed dance routine and everybody knows where they need to be. In other situations, you sometimes can see areas where we haven't nuanced it and there's somebody way out of step and moving in a different direction. And as those situations rise, whether they be in the classroom or in an administrative rank, the only way I know how to deal with it is to deal with it.
Okay. Thank you. I can tell by Mr. Chair's look on his face that he's going to move on. Come back if you can, please.
Yes, and go to Ms. Juvenelli, but just so everyone's aware, we're getting right around time. So we do have some, but I just want everyone to be aware of that. Go ahead, Ms. Juvenelli.
I just have a couple questions. Actually, Ms. Fleming had some of my questions, so that helped. Thank you. One of the questions I have, though, is the Sandy Hook Promise. How many schools are actually participating in that?
I would have to get that information for you as far as how many schools actually participate. I know we do presentations in every school building. I'm not sure that we've made our way through all the buildings as of yet, but I can get information on how many schools have participated up to this point.
And the reason why I ask is because I have been made aware that not all schools are doing that, and I don't know, the requirement or how that works, but and what we should, or should all schools be doing it? I don't know that answer. I just didn't understand why some would be doing it and some wouldn't be. That would be,
I may be able to handle it, I'm going to allow the team to clarify for it, but if I'm remembering correctly, in the process of early in the fall, when we were looking at the overwhelming number, what was perceived to be an overwhelming number of requests from the central office on our school principals and on our schools, Sandy Hook moved from being a mandatory process to being one where schools could choose to participate. But I'll make sure that that gets clarified and brought back to you.
okay. And then one of the other questions that I was concerned with was, like, are we doing any restorative practices any longer in our schools? And really, what's the data? How effective has that been? If we are, like, I was just curious, because we're not talking about that much any longer, and I'm just curious.
So we have met with a lot of our stakeholder groups to talk about those kinds of things, what preventative measures, what restorative measures. There is a list of restorative measures that we currently engage in the student handbook. We are going to be making more recommendations in relation to what restorative practices are working. That's another responsibility of the constituent services team, is to tie in some of those restorative practices to see what their effect is. You're going to hear from me again next month when I talk about our alternative programs and some of the things that we've put in place, but we are going to measure the effectiveness of that. So, for example, the Success Academy should be a restorative, part of a restorative practice. It is somewhat of a punitive piece, but there's also a restorative piece that goes in there. So if we start looking at recidivism rates and things like that, how effective is that restorative practice in relation to what we're trying to accomplish with those students? So we do have a list of those, and peer mediation and things like that are restorative. Doing restorative contracts with students have an effect on their behaviors, but we have not specifically tracked those restorative practices in relation to the incidents that occurred to get them to that restorative practice, to see if we've, cut back on some of those behaviors.
Thank you. I know that there's information nationally that it is effective, and that's why I'm curious where we are in, as a school district in comparison, as well as, how, if we're doing, I always thought everything that I read about it, it's only as good as it's implemented, and I don't think everybody always understood or would implement it the same way, and that was always my concern, is, the understanding and how it's being implemented as well, and it being the same for everyone. So I'm curious on that. The other thing that I was curious about is regarding threat assessment teams, addressing these habitual offenders that has been talked about here. I think that, we know with Parkland that he was an habitual offender, and before he left, was kicked out of the school system, yet we know the results of that. So I would like to see us be very proactive with these habitual offenders, and instead of reactive, because then that's too late. Because I think if we figure out, Ms. Fleming mentioned, that we don't know what all these kids go through daily, and they're all going through, different situations in their home life or their surroundings of where they're, what's going on in their whole family and situations. If we could address those before these, they're definitely acting out, especially habitual offenders, I would think. So if the threat assessment team would jump in there and kind of identify what's going on, and maybe that's how we make sure that they get the IEP and the services that are needed. I feel like sometimes we're very lax in our IEPs system, and I think it's at the school level, we're not responding quickly enough to these parents' requests to help them, to help their children. So if we could, I think, work together as a larger team in responding and trying to make corrections before they get out of control, I think that we might have a little better advantage and better numbers in the long run. My opinion, but I'm about being proactive versus reactive. And I just want to thank you and welcome. I know we've spoken before, but I'm excited to see you in this position, because I think you've really taken it on, and it's very obvious that you're addressing these issues, and I appreciate it. Thank you.
So, Ms. Giovanelli, if I may, a couple of things, and I want Chief to respond to this because he's been working really diligently in what we call threat management now. And the changes from the Stoneman Douglas Commission and what they asked us to do in a very short period of time with some very interesting details. So Chief, if you can get your elevator speech ready, that'd be great. In the meantime, I just want to make sure that we understand that behavior is one aspect of what could potentially identify a student for extra services. But let's be careful about discipline and IEP. IEP really speaks around very specific disabilities that a child may have, and only in very certain areas can we work through an MTSS process, which is now required by the state. We can't always move as fast as a parent wants because there are incremental steps that we must document and show before we just say a student is an exceptional education student. Discipline certainly and behavior is certainly one of those factors we have to consider, but it won't always point us to a disability. In the meantime, on the threat assessment, I would like Chief Newland to weigh in because we've done a lot of work this year on threat assessment.
Member Giovanelli, I wanted to say that you mentioned about the timing of response of responding faster to these threats, which is interesting because as Dr. Benir mentioned, the Florida model that came out on threat assessments was very quick. We had to start get everybody retrained starting in September, but it took effect January 1st. And with this new program, the Florida model, were the time-sensitive responses that are required and monitored. So as we all know, every school has a threat assessment team. We have our coordinator of threat assessments that are assigned over the district, which is our coordinator, Sherry Leonard. But with that, there's an expectation that the response of when a threat assessment occurs, how it's addressed, how fast, and that's that proactive measure you mentioned that we want to make sure that we're addressing it faster than before. So with the new Florida model, that's going to help keep everybody into that time-sensitive responses so we can give the attention to those students that come up as maybe an issue or a concern that may pose a threat. So we've been doing a lot of training. We've got all the mandatory trainings completed as required. And now we're just moving forward by training anybody else that's involved with threat assessments as we move forward. But so far it's been a very good program. Again, it moved very fast to change, but it's gone very well with the time-sensitive responses. And we'll continue that.
Okay, before I briefly come back to Ms. Patrica, is there anybody else? Ms. Jordan, and then Ms. Morgan after that.
And my questions can come later. I just want to come back to this topic. It doesn't have to be addressed right this minute, but if we run into time.
Yeah, we're about at it, but yes, ma'am. Okay. Go ahead, Ms. Jordan.
Okay, thank you. Well, I thank all of you for asking those questions. They were great questions. Thank you for the presentation. I know you were at EDAC and you presented, and I was looking at slide 12 with the fighting, and I know that you had mentioned that because of the way that they've changed the verbiage, fighting may not be fighting. If it's broke up, that's not, before a teacher breaks it up, that's not considered fighting. So those numbers would not even be listed in with this. So the numbers could actually be higher, but we're just not seeing it because of the way that the verbiage has changed with the state. So I just wanted to make sure that that was clear on that one. And then I know that there was a lot of questions and concern about the local codes when they were speaking about, what is disrespect, what is insubordination, and it's based on the lens of the person who is issuing the write-up. So that was another concern, and I'll go over a lot more when I do my EDAC presentation, but I just wanted to hone in on some of those things because they were mentioned here, and the fact that it is based on the lenses of the person writing that. And even a child I know that had 3 write-ups because as he walks, his shirt comes untucked. So that's a write-up because his shirt's supposed to be tucked in. And so I don't know where that falls in, but those numbers could be skewed based on an opinion, perhaps. Maybe I shouldn't say opinion, but it is the way someone looks at that. But I'll give my presentation from EDAC later, but it has to do with a lot of what has been spoken about here today. Thank you.
Sorry. Anything briefly you wanted to mention? I'd like more time on this topic too. I agree with that. It's such an important one. So, Ms. Patrica, anything briefly? Then we gotta.
Yes.
Oh, did I?
Are you going to keep going on this topic then?
Just for, we probably got 5 minutes, I'd say.
Okay,
I'll
mine
give
are
5
quick.
minutes. Then we got to hustle on the other, and the understanding, we're going to come back right up to near the briefing, so.
Right, so mine are quick. When we set these KPIs, where are we compared to a national standard or Florida standard? So I understand that we're trying to reduce, but how do we compare to others? Are we generally doing better? Are we doing worse? How do we establish what our long-term objective is? That's number one. You don't have to answer that now. With respect to the local tracking on 14, those behaviors nationally have gone up as a result of COVID, and are probably exacerbated because of Ian. And that brings me back to a document that you just handed to me, Dr. Bernier, talking about the decision analysis, what's urgent, and what's the impact. And I think there's a lot of stuff here. Some of it is more urgent than others, some of it is more impactful than others, and at some point it would be helpful maybe to unpack some of the things that have been raised here using that scale. And this is like reading 10 pages into the document you gave me, so I may be completely in the wrong direction. The last thing is when you talk about how do you evaluate programs, specifically smoking. So we've had a smoking program, a 10-week smoking program in place for several years, and yet our rate has gone up from 0.5 to 0.9. So my question is that an effect, is that program effective? So those are my comments. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Morgan. Ms. Patrica?
Yeah, and these are questions, I suppose, that you could get back to me. But I have commented before that I don't expect a guarantee that you will keep my children safe in our schools. I don't expect that guarantee, but I do expect that when we have processes and programs in place that they are being followed with fidelity. So as we look at slide 16, what are we doing to make sure that these things are taking place? What are we doing to get to Mrs. Giovanelli's point? What are we doing to make sure that if a school has signed up for the Sandy Hook promise, it's being implemented? What are we doing to make sure our schools are actually doing Wellness Wednesdays? Like, how are we ensuring that compliance is occurring in our schools? And then my last comment is one for the future to Dr. Bernier while we're on the subject of changes to the student code of conduct. I believe you mentioned that you'll be coming in front of us with that. I'm wondering whether we can expect to see academic integrity addressed with regard to the use of AI. You don't have to answer that. I just know that that's a question that will come up when you bring it in front of us from me if it's not addressed in the code of conduct. That's it for now. Thanks.
Thank you. I have just two brief things, and then we'll move on. So not to answer now, I'm trying to say this the nicest way possible, but getting to PBIS, you talked about statistics. Is it statistically significant, though, that it's working? I know, if you can get back.
I believe the data that we provided last year gave us great indication that the positive behavioral intervention supports, when done with fidelity, are reaping some benefits. But it was 1 year of study. We need to go back. We need to pull that data again, look at the discipline referrals as a school year comes to a close, and see whether that data continues to hold. And I will certainly look at it through a lens of statistical relevance.
Thank you. Last thing is kind of just a comment, maybe a little bit of a question there, obviously, and thank you, Ms. Langford Fleming and everyone else for their questions. One of the things that comes up with all of us, obviously, is culture, and one of the reasons teachers are leaving, obviously, right now, discipline is significant. I mean, it's one of the things I hear about constantly. So, but one of the elephants in the room, I think, that we need to talk about, and I can say this as a parent, is parental responsibility and parental involvement. And I think that's a lot of what has to do with some of the increases, especially from COVID. And, I know that you guys are working on different ways to make parents aware and involved, but I mean, that's, it starts with us. So, I mean, as a former juvenile criminal attorney, that's something that came up a lot, and I saw that, and I think that's one of the things that the teachers are feeling right now, so that the parents are, not either following up on what they're saying or reaching out or trying to work with them. And I think, again, that's a societal, entire United States thing. So, but, I'd like to continue to see ways we can focus and really inform and instruct in parents. I know that's something you're trying to do, but I felt like we should bring up that elephant at this point at least. So that are my questions for the now and comments. Thank you, everyone. Thank you, Mr. Arasi. Director Newland, thank you. Thank you for the job you're doing. And Ms. Scott, thank you. Sorry for not identifying you up there before. So everyone have a great day, and we're going to move on to item number 2, which is fiscal year 2025 budget discussion with Dr. Desamores and Ms. Lecter.
It's the PDF, yeah, so she's just gonna have to, oops.
All right. Good afternoon, Dr. Bernier, members of the board. We are here to give some information, our first update to you all for the FY25 budget. As you know, some action has gone on at the legislative level. Of course, that's not done, but we just wanted to kind of give an overview of what we know at this point, some implications of that, and then talk a little bit about next steps. So I'll just turn it over to Mrs. Letcher, who will take you through the information.
Thank you. I want to start with our projections for our FTE for next year. The state has not come to their final decisions yet. We're still working with them back and forth, but what we're recommending right now for Lee County is 107,642 as our FTE number. That represents a 3.88% growth over the third calculation of this year, which is 4,016 students. Currently, and we've seen this year a growth already of 3,576 students, or 3.57%. So we do expect that to continue to grow. Our largest increase that we're looking at right now is in our ESOL population. That is one of the areas that we have seen our largest increase. Excuse me, so that is the area that we are asking for the largest increase in, and that's the piece right now that we're going back and forth with the state on. The next thing I want to talk to you about, you had on the slides, there was some information that back up that we had the third calculation to the governor's budget, and I just wanted to go over a couple of things on that. The governor's budget at the time that it moved forward showed us at 106,632, which is about 1,010 students under what we're projecting our student population to be for next year. The base student allocation that the governor was proposing was $5,247.02, which was an increase of $107. In his budget, he did indicate a decline in our tax roll. The reason that we can see that is, the required local effort goes up and down based on the tax roll, but the discretionary taxes really does go up if the tax roll goes up and goes down if it goes down, and they were actually showing a decrease in our discretionary tax, which would indicate that they were expecting our tax roll to go down. I did reach out to the tax collector's office, and they of course told me that they could give me no projections at this time. So I don't believe that we would be seeing a decline. From everything that we can see, it does appear like it will be going up, but for some reason the governor's budget did show something different. His budget was looking at an overall increase for Lee County of $33.7 million. And just to put that into comparison, last year, or the current year, our increase was $77 million over the previous year. So it's quite a bit less increase than we have seen this year. The governor's budget, however, while it's a good look at that. It really is no indication of really where we're going to end up. Saying that, we've kind of looked at the House and Senate budget that came to us as well. They did not do a breakdown by individual counties. They only gave the state, so I can only make some assumptions as we go through here. They are both utilizing a different student FTE number, so neither of them have finalized on a number either. So once they do, it should come closer together. They both are recommending a base student allocation increase of about $175. So it seems like that's probably where we're going to land at with our base student allocation increase. The House is proposing that there'll be no increase in the safe school and mental health allocations, while the Senate is proposing an increase in those two areas. The House is showing an increase in educational enrichment and our ESE guarantee allocation, both of which would be beneficial to Lee County. Because we didn't get a breakdown by county, I made some assumptions. I took the governor's budget, assumed that, looked at the percentage of Lee County to the total state. We were about 3.46% of the total state. And using that logic, applied it to the House and the Senate. With that, it looks like the House, we would get about a $54.9 million increase, and the Senate, we'd be sitting at about $51.8 million increase based on just that logic that was used with the governor's budget. We'll keep watching as things come out, and of course, the first time we get our individual county runs, I'll be able to give you more individual information on what it looks like for us, but that's what we have as of right now. Turn it over now.
And I was just going to add, related to next steps, we have, this is just our first preliminary information, so between now and June, which you would expect to see the preliminary budget then, we'll be coming to you often with additional information as we continue to build on the budget for FY25.
Thank you.
No comments from me, sir.
Okay. Board members, questions, comments? Ms. Patrica?
Yeah, thank you. Very preliminary, so not a ton of questions. In fact, I'm not even going to ask most of them I have, except to say, going forward, when you bring more budget information to us, can you show us historically how the BSA compares to prior years? To me, the BSA is the most important thing in terms of our freedom of spending, and to me, whatever. You get what I'm asking?
Yep.
Yes.
Thank you.
Yes. Mm-hmm.
Yeah. And just so you know, this BSA does appear to be a straight BSA increase. Last year there was some movement of funds which kind of skewed the BSA. This year does appear to be a complete BSA increase.
Perfect. Thank you.
Any other comments, questions? Okay. I don't really have anything either, so, thank you both for your hard work. I just want to thank Mr. Gomez as well for his hard work going up in Tallahassee and advocating for us, so I appreciate that, but that's all we have at the moment, so thank you so much.
Thank you.
Next up on the agenda is item 3, agenda review for tonight's action meeting. So whenever you're ready, Dr. Bernier, please proceed.
Thank you, Mr. Chair. We have several questions. I think they're all very valuable, and I'm always amazed at the level of detail for the community that may be watching. This board, while they get the agenda way ahead of time, really digs in once it's posted and really provides some excellent questions, and I think these are great questions which provide additional clarity for our community. So the first question comes from the consent from Executive Services G1, the approval of the agreement with Fulcrum Management Solutions doing business as Thought Exchange. Thought Exchange, as I explained at last meeting, is a platform for the School District of Lee County to manage and meaningfully engage with the community we serve by providing multiple engagement methods, instant advanced data analysis, and survey information all in one place. It offers both qualitative and quantitative data to deeply understand our stakeholder priorities. The platform provides various engagement tools such as surveys, exchanges, and interviews for interactive two-way dialogue and participant prioritized data. So as Chief Newland explained in his previous presentation, if I were to rate a particular item below a standard that we helped identify, so we want our people to say on a scale of 1 to 5, that they feel 3 or above in terms of being safe. If they were to give us a 2, this interactive survey would then ask them additional questions as to some reasons why and what may be transpiring. So the tool will be available to all district divisions, departments, and the board to be used as part of community meetings, community forums, and other stakeholders, both internal and external, to engagements where feedback and data are required for decision-making in preparation for strategic planning and course correction of the plan. So this is really connected to our strategic plan. If you go back through all of our key performance indicators, several of them are dependent upon having excellent survey tools, and rather than trying to do that ourselves, we're asking to contract with this particular organization.
Great.
Okay. Academic services, on the H consent agenda, H5, approval of the revised class 2024 graduation dates. I'm going to apologize in advance. I've talked to all of you over the phone from various locations. I'm very worried about an aunt, an uncle, or a grandma who's already purchased an airline ticket, but the district and one of our local arenas were not able to come to a contractual agreement for graduations, specifically over liability insurance, and therefore we will no longer be using one of those graduation venues in this upcoming graduation season. I can share with you that both the high school office and the legal team worked very, very hard to land this particular contract. We did suspect that moving into next year we would have to make this change anyway, but without a contractual agreement, we can no longer graduate at one of the facilities. Therefore, Fort Myers High, Gateway High, and Lehigh Senior High graduate at one of the largest venues that we have in place. Those graduation ceremonies for these 3 schools will now move to our second largest, where we can still accommodate the schools and the guests, to the Alico Arena. In order to accommodate the graduation ceremonies at Alico, 3 of our high schools, were a little smaller, needed to be relocated to FSW on a different date than was originally scheduled and communicated. So let me be clear, Fort Myers High, Gateway High, and Lehigh Senior High are still on the same date. They're in a different location. The 3 schools I'm about to mention next will have a change in location and, unfortunately, a change in date. The selection of the schools in particular was to move based upon the size of the senior class and make sure that those senior classes could still be accommodated. Those impacted schools were Cape Coral High, South Fort Myers High, and Ida Baker High. The 3 days added to the graduation schedule are Thursday, May 16th, and Monday, May 20th, and Tuesday, May 21st. So we're adding some time both at the beginning and the end. Some of you questioned, and I think the community would ask as well, why didn't we just at all move forward and start graduations just earlier so we could be done on Sunday? Great plan. Problem is, those arenas are also used by other local districts to graduate their senior classes, even though they may not be a Lee County school. So the availability at FSW came after the Sunday, not prior, and that will create a change in a board meeting from the 21st and moving it to the 22nd. I would note that there is a cost savings associated with this because the larger arena has been very expensive for us to utilize, but that is not the reason. It was about accommodating the classes, the schedules, and want to thank Mr. Clayton Simmons for all his work related to supporting our graduation ceremonies and the difficult job of having to make this change.
So Fort Myers, Gateway, and what was the third school that there's no change in it, but just venue change, not date?
Fort Myers High School, Gateway High, and Lehigh Senior High. They were scheduled at the larger arena. They will move to the next largest arena, Alico. Their ceremonies will be on the same date, but in a different location.
Great, because I have received already an email regarding that, which you had warned me, but I think it's just important that, you know, we're doing our best, and opportunities, sometimes things do change, but
we're trying to tell people in enough time so they can make the appropriate travel or other arrangements to know that their graduation ceremony may be on a different date.
thank you.
So my next one is the consent business services, I-2, approval of the memorandum of understanding with Florida Gulf Coast University. This is a partnership with FGCU to create and build our small business enterprise program, previously briefed to the board. FGCU has an existing program for small business initiatives, the Small Business Development Center through the College of Business. And we are tapping into that opening and building competition and increase the vendors which we have the potential to use. Let me reread that. So what we're doing is we're tapping into that to open up and build competition and increase the vendors we have for potential use. FGCU is building our website and theirs to advertise our program, help us work with small businesses to collect the appropriate information to certify themselves as small businesses, and helping certified small businesses help them through the process of responding to any RFQ the district puts out.
Thank you. I think this is a great collaboration, and I just thought that's something that the community should be aware of. I think it's great that we work with our local colleges and do stuff like this. So I think it's great. Thank you.
So the next question also comes from the Business Services Agenda I3, approval to the ITN number N237464LA Financial Auditing Services. Can we please advise how this contract, who has this contract now, and what the costs are each year, to include contracted amount and the cost of additional supports regarding the fee breakdown? There were several other questions regarding, why did we go with a vendor that scored second highest? Why didn't we move to the least expensive person who was on the vendor list? So let me begin to try to explain. The vendor who was selected was based upon all the criteria by which vendors are always scored. Beyond price, the committee also evaluates the project team, their experience, and the firm's approach to an audit project. The type of service is not selected based solely upon low price, but evaluated on the qualifications of a firm, its team, the tools, and its resources that the firm has and their ability to conduct an audit. All vendors who submitted proposals were scored first on their written proposals and then invited for and scored on a presentation. These two scoring opportunities stand separate, and the recommendation is to move forward with the vendor identified in the recommendation. As to some additional information regarding the breakdown, that information will be provided in a board update.
So who has the contract now? Don't we do have someone now, right?
I don't have that information in my
Okay.
current hand. That's one of the answers that I have to be able to provide.
Okay, thank you.
Can I move on, Chair? Consent in Operations L7, approval to renew the ITB B20737-3JC, rental of spot coolers and dehumidifiers. Why was the vendor, Regional Air Solutions, declined their ability to renew? The only information that I have, which comes from staff, is that according to emails received by our procurement agent on January 29, 24, they have been trying to reach out to the vendor for several weeks. They have sent emails and called on both numbers that the candidate provided on file, and no response has been received. So therefore, in order to move forward with the ITB, we removed Regional Air Solutions from this particular item and are moving forward with the other companies that are named.
Thank you.
L13, approval to renew the ITM number N18733-4LN, Indoor Air Quality Environmental Consulting, Asbestos Lead Abatement, Microbial Remediation, Remodeling, and Painting. So why are we extending a contract that will terminate on 25/24? Their belief is this was the last option to renew and final renewal. There are no additional options to renew this contract, so can we understand why this is not going out for bid? Are we violating board policy? And since the board attorney is not in the workflow for this approval, are we sure that we're moving forward in the best possible way forward? There's also some information regarding a quote from the February 26, 2019 board meeting. I've pulled that agenda item, and in the area of recommended action and under the public comment that was provided, the last paragraph in that information says, district staff certified to perform services listed in the ITN may also support district indoor air quality projects. The ITN, effective for 3 years, beginning February 26, 2019 through February 25, 22, with renewal options for 3 additional one-year periods upon written agreement for the vendors of the district. So that was in 2019. So the ITN, which I went back and pulled the actual physical copy of the ITN, speaks very clearly also to this matter. The contract term says the district anticipates awarding a contract for 3 years commencing upon board approval or until new proposals are taken and awarded. That approval came on February 26, 2019. The contract, or any portion thereof, has an option of being renewed for 3 additional one-year periods for a total duration not to exceed 6 years upon mutual agreement of both parties and under the same terms and conditions. The item was then renewed after the initial term. The item then was renewed on January 22nd, again in the language for public comment, the beginning February 26, 2019 through February 25, 2022, with renewal options for 2 additional one-year periods upon written agreement, because in 2022, you were exercising your first renewal, so there were only 2 left. Then on February 22nd, 2023, of which I am now the responsible party, I want to make sure that that's clear. In the public comment, there is an error. It says beginning February 26 through 2019 through February 25, 2022, and renewed on February 25, 2023, with 2 more renewal options available. In reality, there was only 1 more option that was available to us to renew this, which brings us forward to what was originally on the agenda tonight, which I have pulled in order to do all this research. This particular item now has another, which has been referred to me as a typo. It says that we are extending beyond the 3-year period beginning February 26, 2019 for February 25, 2022, and renewed through February of 25, 2024. And then it says, with no more renewal options available, which is correct, because if you approved this tonight, this would be the final opportunity for us to renew under the original ITN, because it gave us 3 original years and 3 renewals. Tonight's item, if it had moved forward, would have been the final renewal option, which led to some confusion because at the very end, it says that we're going to renew for the February 26, 2024 through February 25, 2025. I think the confusion came over the phrase with no more renewal options available, meaning how could we possibly renew if we had no more available? We actually still have 1 year remaining. I've spoken to the board members. I've pulled this item. I'm asking procurement to take a deeper and harder look. We have some other ideas and solutions that we may be moving forward, including putting the entire ITN out to bid. But I will share with the board, this is a important issue, because anytime we deal with indoor air quality, mold abatement, asbestos or lead abatement, we need to make sure we have these services on contract to be able to use. So while I pulled the item in order to be able to do this additional research, I wanted to make sure that the board understood that it will be potentially coming back, and I will keep you apprised and potentially bringing it back on the February meeting, our next February meeting. Any questions? Okay, so public hearings, last one, Q1, adopted renew revised policy, specifically around 3281, use of employees' personal property at school. I've been receiving a lot of emails both from you, the board office, many constituents, and Mike personally. We've been responding to them in the same regard, thanking them for their input, that I would share that with the board. But the question is, can you explain how this will be implemented by staff? Please help and advise your directive on this once the board approves this policy. I am looking forward to a robust discussion later this afternoon regarding these policies. We still have one more opportunity, and I've shared with all of you, neutral needs some definition operationally for a superintendent. Because when you pass this policy, it will be my responsibility to bring forward and direct principals to go out and take a look at their school buildings and their school classrooms. I need a better understanding of what I'm going to be directing them not only to look for, but what classroom neutrality means. So it's not a direct answer to the question. It is simply saying I'm looking forward to the briefing later this afternoon.
Go ahead, Ms. Juvenile.
And we can wait and have that conversation this afternoon. as you mentioned. I just think it's important that we have clarity here because there is some confusion, and I think this board needs to help you understand what your job is at that, you know, after the policy is passed. And I feel that maybe we haven't done that. And so it's really important that we together help you understand. And I look forward to that conversation as well. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Giovanelli and board members. It's always my intent to make sure that I can execute your policies through procedures and make those operational to our school buildings and our school leaders. So I appreciate the opportunity for us to have a deeper and richer discussion.
Any other agenda item questions that weren't asked for the superintendent, board members? Okay. Seeing none. Thank you, Dr. Bernier. We are going to move on to good of the order. And board members, will start with Ms. Giovanelli.
Ooh, I'm not quite prepared, but I'll be quick. We had a great parade, great Stemtastics. In fact, that was huge back on the 10th, and I just want to thank all the teachers and students and staff and the foundation for Lee County that put this on because it was amazing. I don't know if any other board members were there. I know Ms. Jordan was there, but it was, and I think it's going to grow even from there. So next year, we're looking forward to maybe even having a farmer's market with how our schools are growing their produce and like enriching that so the community can see what is happening in our schools. I actually was talking with the Boy Scouts, and I think they're going to get more involved with it because there's a lot that they do in the community that helps our students and that attributes and enriches our students. And I just look forward to that growing to be in the largest, one of the largest events that we do as a district, as well as with the foundation. And we couldn't do it without everyone working together in that. And I hope others will come out next year and see it because I think it's going to be spectacular next year. I can't remember anything else at the moment, and maybe I'll remember later this evening, but that's it. Thank you.
Thank you. Ms. Patrica?
Thank you. I don't really have good of the order. I just want to apologize to my colleagues on the board for indicating that I'll be pulling those policies so late. I'm hoping this afternoon that the discussion will explain to you why I'm pulling. But I also don't even know if I need to pull because we received an email from Ms. Morgan earlier saying she was going to pull them too. So really just I'm apologizing for my brain farts. And I don't do this, you know, I don't break rules, but this one is important. So that's it for me. Thanks.
Okay. Ms. Jordan?
Can we mark that down that she broke a rule today? I'm just kidding. I just want to say thanks, Ms. Giovanelli, for mentioning that because the kids and our schools and our teachers and our principals, everybody that were at Stemtastic were phenomenal. It was just a really good feeling to see everybody out there. And heck, I learned a lot of different things, and I'm going to use a lot of those tools with my grandkids, so I really appreciated that. And then even with the parade, our students and our schools that are participated in that, they were troopers. They did a great job, and they really represented the district really strong. And then with EDAC, I haven't put that all together, so I'll wait for that until a little bit later. So thank you.
Mr. Persons?
I want to mention I got to be at the Do the Right Thing ceremony last week. And
Thank you.
thank you. Miss Morgan could not make it, and I want to thank her for letting me come. So any of y'all can't make it, just let me know. That is one of the most fun things we do. For those that don't know, it's run by the Sheriff's Office. They give out trophies and awards to students who have done the right thing and been nominated by their school. But the important thing of this time was 2 students saw a student choking in the lunchroom. And they ran and got help, and they were able to save the girl. Where all the other students were just standing around watching, and there weren't any teachers right at that table. So, I mean, that was actually a life-saving type thing. Others were as simple as finding lost money for candy, you know, and turning it in rather than keeping it. A lot of those kind of things, and reporting helping people get to their classes and things. But it's always a joy to do that, and it's a great program. That's all.
Ms. Langford Fleming.
Excuse me, I just have a few items, and it's more questions for updates, either in our one-on-ones to the superintendent or in the near future. I know that ESSER funds are no longer going to be available, so questions I would have or need to be updated on how is this going to affect the day-to-day classroom, meaning our MTSS intervention specialists, our hearing impaired or speech therapists, how are those jobs going to be secured if they are? Those are just some questions I had from some members in our community, actually. And if we could get an update on the construction on how Cypress Middle is going. I happen to drive by there almost every day, so it just reminds me. And updates on the improvements to still some Band-Aids that were put on but need to be permanent fixtures for Heights Elementary. And I know that you and I discussed earlier about traffic studies in some of our schools who are heavily trafficked. I had to go that way yesterday and I was stuck, and it's worse than it ever has been on Gladiolus, and I used to drive that every single day. So I don't know if it's the construction from, big trucks going to and from Sanibel Island to continue to, I know that they're using that, but it's definitely starting to play into student dismissal, possibly buses being late. So those are the only things I wanted to update. And I'll give my health advisory update when we do our meeting updates at our next meeting.
Ms. Morgan.
Yeah, and I'll have to deliver mine at the next meeting too. Thank you.
Okay. Couple things for me briefly. Actually, in regards to the committees, I just want to make sure I get this in. I wasn't able to attend the last SPA, CSI Advisory Committee. Thank you to Ms. Jordan for getting that. I just wanted to put something on the record. I didn't completely forgot about this. They did make a motion. I just want to put this out there. They asked for a more detailed project plan for the HR transformation with more of a focus on the people and processes that require re-engineering, in parentheses, less than the technology, to better understand how the district intends to achieve the transformation in such an expedited timeline. Additionally, what ongoing support will be offered to reinforce this ambitious organizational change management, and how do we intend to measure the success impact of this strategy. And I will get that over to the administration as well. So my apologies on that. Went to a couple things. Trafalgar Elementary Art Show, had a real good time at that. So also attended the Mariner girls playoff soccer game recently. That was an amazing game. I believe they play actually tonight versus North, so it should be a good game. I believe that's 6:30 tonight possibly. So last thing is some of us went to the Golden Apple Breakfast for the finalists. That was a really cool experience, and I always enjoy seeing what the amazing things the foundations do for our teachers. So that's all I have. Moving on to Attorney Debris Bruno. If you have any comments or...
I have none. Thank you, Mr. Chairman.
Okay. Then Superintendent Bernier.
Nothing, sir.
Okay, at this point, we'll have a board briefing today at 2:30, followed by board action meeting at 6 o'clock. I believe our performance at 5:45 p.m. as well. At this point, having no other business to come before this body and seeing no objection, this meeting is adjourned. The time is 1:37 p.m. Thank you.